What is the biggest unsolved mystery in human history? Story 1. In 1893, British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans purchased some ancient stones with mysterious inscriptions on them at a flea market in Athens. On a later trip to the excavations at Knossos on the island of Crete, he recognized one of the symbols from his stones and began a study of the engraved tablets being uncovered at various sites on the island. He discovered two different systems, which he called Linear A and Linear B. While Linear B was deciphered in the early 1950s, it turned out to represent an early form of Greek. Linear A, above, has still not been deciphered. There is an entire culture of information that predates much of our history, a window into ancient humanity that is simply locked away from us because we don't know how to read it. Story 2. An active one in the archaeology world is the exact time frame of when humans made it to the Americas. The date keeps getting pushed back with more controversial discoveries that then just turn to evidence as they pile up. It's a fascinating story to see unfold. Story 3. Late to the party, but I haven't seen anyone mention the Indus Valley Script. There was a huge civilization in northern India and Pakistan around 3300 to 1300 BC. It spanned more area than any other civilization at the time. They invented writing independently, something only done 5 to 6 times in history. But to this day, with all the thousands of inscriptions we have and all the documented contact with other civilizations, we haven't deciphered their writing. There's no known Rosetta Stone, no known descendant scripts, no known documentation of the language other than what is written in the Indus Valley Script. But the biggest mystery isn't how to read the script or what it says, but the question of whether we'll ever be able to know. Is it even possible to decipher a language we know absolutely nothing about? Edit, to all the people talking about AI, yes. I get it. AI is cool, but this is a far larger task than the pattern recognizing and replicating AI we have today can tackle on its own. Some AI has been used to find patterns in which characters go together most often, but this is a long shot away from being able to read the script. AI will have to be far more advanced than it is today to be able to crack this code. Story 4. In Australia, in 2011, someone broke into a TV station and spent 4 hours flushing $100,000 down the toilet. Story 5. So the monarch butterfly migrates to Mexico and back every year. During the year there are a full 4 generations of butterflies that live and die during the journey. Upon returning back from Mexico, the butterfly manages to find the same trees its relative started out at despite never having been there. Story 6. We like to think we understand the universe and that physics is a well-grounded discipline, and in some ways it is. However, we have no idea what dark matter or dark energy is, and yet we think it makes up 27% and 68% of the universe respectively. Story 7. I read these threads and wonder how many disappeared people are homeless transients with no memory of who they are. There must be considerable overlap, I imagine. Story 8. Why is there something rather than nothing, is still pretty much at IMHO. Story 9. The final words of the Emperor Titus were, "I have but one regret." We don't know and never will what that regret was. Edit, on reflection it's even better, I have made but one mistake. Supreme confidence. Story 10. That most of human history is undocumented and we will never know our entire history as a species. We didn't start recording our history until 5000 BCE, we do know we shifted to agrarian societies around 10,000 BCE, but beyond that we have no idea what we were like as a species. We will never know the undocumented parts of our history that spans tens of thousands of years. We are often baffled by the technological progress of our ancient ancestors, like those in Asia who must have been masters of the sea to have colonized the variety of islands there and sailed vast stretches of ocean to land on Australia and New Zealand. What is ironic is we currently have an immense amount of information about our world today and the limited documented history of our early days as a species, but that is only a small fraction of our entire history. Story 11. I don't know about biggest, but I always thought the Voynich manuscript was very interesting. A huge book written in an unknown language or cipher that has never been translated or decoded with diagrams of plant species that don't exist. Lots of theories surrounding it, but no definitive answers as to the origins or the content. Story 12. Neither medicine nor science has an answer for what consciousness is, or where it originates. Story 13. Not sure if it's the biggest mystery. But the Antikythera mechanism is pretty wild. Dated to at least 60 BC, possibly as old as 200 BC, it's as complex as clockworks that didn't show up until the 1400s, over a millennium later. It's just such a strange technological anomaly. Who made it? What else did they make, and why haven't we found more stuff as advanced? Story 14. Maybe the question of how many things are in our oceans that we did not discover yet. The sea is hella scary to me, and not because of the water. Story 15. Who was behind the Gardner Museum heist? Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of art was taken, and we have little to no clue who was behind it, and none of the paintings have surfaced. Story 16. Between 1200 and 1150 BCE, most of the civilizations in the eastern Mediterranean region were either greatly depleted or collapsed entirely, bringing an abrupt end to the Bronze Age. These civilizations were massively depopulated, their palaces and cities were destroyed or abandoned, and some transformed into small, isolated village cultures or nomadic herders. The Greek Linear B script was lost, and there is no written record of the following period of Greek history, meaning that Greeks of the time were probably illiterate. This rapid decline affected, to one extent or another, major historical powers like Mycenaean Greece, New Kingdom Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and Assyria, among others. And we don't know why it happened. These were sprawling, thriving civilizations, with healthy economies, elaborate trade networks, complex bureaucracy, written language, and large-scale agriculture, and they just died. For some reason. There are plenty of theories, of course, but ultimately there's no conclusive evidence that tells the story of how the Bronze Age collapsed into the intermediate period that preceded the Iron Age. Story 17. Why did we all just globally decide that those blue Dutch cookie tins hold sewing supplies? Story 18. How the universe is even possible. Why the fuck do we even exist? Story 19. I love unsolved mysteries, but one that always gets me is the murder of Missy Beavers. She was killed in the early morning at a church that she taught yoga at. Security footage from the church showed the murderer roaming the halls of the church all night, but that's not what's weird. What's weird is that the murderer was dressed head to toe in police riot gear. It is the weirdest and eeriest video footage and is just unsettling. There's lots of theories, but her murder has never been solved, and I believe there hasn't even been a real suspect in the case. Story 20. No one knows exactly who founded Rome, or when. All known records of the city's early history date from the 5th or 6th century BC at the earliest, which doesn't help the usual foundation date of 753 BC, and all of the foundation myths are exactly that, stories. All we know with any certainty is that Rome was ruled by kings at some point in its early history. But we don't know who founded Rome, if it really was by a Romulus-type figure or if it was multiple villages that eventually merged into a single town. Even with the latter possibility, it's unknown when those communities would have considered themselves as a single town or when they decided to call it Rome. Story 21. The Alps murders. To this day, not only is there no suspect but seemingly absolutely no motive to the murders of the Al-Hili family and a completely unrelated French cyclist. The police don't even know who the target was. The more you look at the case, the more questions there are. The victims were killed in the manner of a professional hit, but using a gun that no professional would use. The gunman was experienced and calm enough to leave the scene quickly and efficiently, so much so that the cyclist on the scene minutes behind Mollier saw and heard absolutely nothing. The murders, though, were uncontrolled and carried out in broad daylight where anybody could have chanced upon the scene. Indeed, had Saad not beached his car trying to escape, most of the victims may have survived. No suspect. No motive. No clear target. Weird mix of professional hit and complete novice. This case baffles me utterly. I dearly hope to see it solved one day. Story 22. So I have a personal experience, sort of. My father had a coworker who was a great guy. Good at his work, fun to talk to, nobody had any complaints about him. He lived in an apartment right next to work, so the night watchman at the workplace would see him whenever he went out. So one night, he went out in his pajamas, talking on his cell phone, nodded at the watchman. The watchman didn't think much of it. After all, it's not all that weird to take a walk even though it was quite late. He didn't think much of it. The watchman didn't see him come back, but he figured he missed him when he went on his bathroom break probably. But the guy didn't show up at work the next day. Someone from work went to check up and he wasn't there. Nothing was disturbed, he was just gone. Everyone thought he had dropped dead, killed by thugs or an accident or some medical condition. The workplace filed a police report. Here's when it gets weird. It turns out, the guy had created a fake identity. Any credentials he had given were fake. The references he had given had never heard of him. The family address he'd given didn't exist. The police didn't find anything illegal in the apartment, but they didn't find anything that would give a clue as to who he was either. We moved away a few years ago, but I don't think the case was ever solved. It's definitely the best unexplained mystery that I've personally come across. Edit. To answer some questions, I don't live in the US and there's no concept of witness protection here that I know of. My father was a pathologist at a women's hospital in a very small town and the guy worked as his technician. He definitely had some experience in the field before he joined. The job also wasn't a well-paid one as many employees would quit quite frequently. Story 23. The lead mask mystery of Brazil. The bodies of two men found wearing lead masks covering their eyes with a notebook that mysteriously read 4:30 p.m. be at the determined place. 6:30 p.m. swallow capsules, after effect, protect metals, wait for signal, in Portuguese. Story 24. Back in 2002 I folded and placed 3 $100 bills in my back right pocket while standing in my living room. I grabbed my wallet from the bar, walked to the front door where I decided it was safer to transfer the hundreds of dollars to my wallet. My pocket was empty. There was no one else home. I looked everywhere for more than an hour. This episode has seriously damaged my sanity and self-esteem. Story 25. Who is going to Long John Silver's enough to keep them around? Story 26. What was there before the Big Bang? Story 27. Two possibilities exist, either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. Arthur C. Clarke. Story 28. Did D.B. Cooper survive or did he die? Story 29. Who is Jack the Ripper? Who murdered Elizabeth Short? Who murdered JonBenet Ramsey? Story 30. The disappearance of Asha Degree. 9-year-old Asha Degree disappeared from her home in Shelby, North Carolina on Valentine's Day 2000. She went to bed the night before, and when her mother went to wake her up in the morning, Asha was gone. She was seen walking along Highway 18 at around 4 o'clock in the morning. Several passing motorists saw her, and when one turned around and began to approach her, she left the roadside and ran into a wooded area. It was a cold night and the witness said there was a storm raging when he saw her. She wasn't wearing a jacket or socks. A year after she vanished, a construction worker found her book bag in a wooded area. It was wrapped in a plastic bag. Story 31. Why is the letter D in fridge, but not in refrigerator? Story 32. In India, In the early 2000s there a creature called the Monkey Man, who was attacking the people living in Delhi, and people were so terrified from him that they stopped sleeping in night so that they can protect themselves. We still don't know whether it was real or was it just a rumor that people started believing in. Story 33. The Murder of Atlantuya, Mongolian Model. Nobody knows for sure what happened, but the general theory that Malaysia's former prime minister and his witch of a wife murdered her is generally accepted as truth. Poor woman had C4 strapped all over her body before she was blown up. Google the story and I'll be happy to fill in the gaps for any further info. My family are very close to politicians and I interviewed the lead investigator. Story 34. Where is Jimmy Hoffa? Real answer is probably in multiple places. Story 35. When I was a kid I was playing with a bouncy ball in my room, it had rolled under my bed and I went to go grab it, absolutely nothing was under the bed. Being a small child with an attention span of a goldfish, I started to play with Legos instead. A couple minutes later the ball rolled out from under the bed, seemingly from nowhere. Story 36. Clearly there is only one answer. How the fuck does the universe even exist? Story 37. Cicada 3301. Who were they? What were they doing? Were they some secret three-letter agencies? Story 38. Who blew up the Georgia Guidestones? Story 39. Why does Donald Duck put a towel around his waist when he gets out of the shower if he doesn't wear pants? Story 40. Who was behind the Max Headroom signal hijacking? Story 41. The more we learn, the less we know. We have an incredibly little perception of our world and everything that surrounds us as we try to understand everything, just like the first humans finding fire, yet the biggest mystery in all of human history that will continue to drown us, is no other than ourselves. The brain is one of the most impressive creations of nature, however it always keeps contradicting itself. We thought the brain's objective was to survive, but also many people every year end up losing the fight against their own brains. We know little about how does mental conditions like dementia, psychosis in all of its forms, autism, personality disorders and phobias really come from. Existence and conscience are probably the most mysterious out of these. We don't understand how does conscience really works and thus reality. The human eye, for example, allows us to see bits of light in things, and we know for a fact there are objects that change once they are being viewed. But does anything really exist if there is nobody there to see it or feel it? And finally there is death. One of the most important laws in chemistry is that matter cannot be created or destroyed, just changed. Lavoisier, I think. Our conscience certainly is a kind of matter since it occupies a space in the universe. However, what happens after death is completely unknown. Matter isn't destroyed, so there is no way that our conscience, memories and thoughts can just disappear once they are part of something in the universe. But then, where do they go once we die? These are just some of the hardest mysteries to solve in humanity. Story 42. I would really like to know how bread was invented. Which madman looked at a field of wheat and thought to themselves, if we dry it and ground it, mix it with water, pound it into a ball and place it in a warm box for a while, it could be really delicious. And don't get me started on yeast. Story 43. How am I me? How are you? Consciousness is a crazy thing. Story 44. Imhotep was a super genius in ancient Egypt, around 2700 BC. He was, allegedly, an amazing physician, the architect of one of the first proto-pyramids, invented a bunch of stuff. A century after his death, people started worshipping him as the god of medicine. And yet, his tomb has never been found. To me, that's fascinating. He must have been given an amazing burial, and if his tomb were ever found, we'd probably discover some really cool stuff. But its location is still unknown. I often wonder if he used his giant brain to design and or hide his own tomb so well that no looter, no archaeologist, but I'm being redundant, tongue sticking out, would ever find it. From what I understand, Imhotep was basically like Leonardo da Vinci of his era. Wiki has more on him. Story 45. Where the fuck did my 10mm socket go? Story 46. The Fermi Paradox. There are more solar systems out there than grains of sand on the Earth, but absolutely zero evidence of Type 1, 2, 3 civilizations. Story 47. The Bronze Age Collapse. Story 48. Cleopatra's tomb is still undiscovered officially, so that maybe. Story 49. If I could answer any question, it would be the origin of viruses. Story 50. Who were the Sea People? Where is the body of Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan? Who wrote the Voynich manuscript? What happened to the colony of Roanoke? Story 51. Zodiac Killer. The guy could be dead by now and we're still thinking he's out there. Story 52. Where the universe comes from. We know the Big Bang happened, but what about the universe before it, and what about the universe before that, and what about the origin of it all? Did everything magically appear one day? Or has it always been in one shape or form? We'll never know because it'd be impossible to. Story 53. The treasure of the Knights Templar. To this day it has never been found. Is it true that it exists or is it just fiction? How can treasures of that magnitude just vanish? The story behind it is fascinating. But is it just that now a story that is now a part of the history behind the Knights Templar and the treasure doesn't actually exist anymore? Maybe one day someone will find out. Story 54. If by in human history you mean during human history, what happened to all the other human species? Did we kill them? Did they go extinct independently from us? A mix of both? Did we assimilate some to the last individual? Could we have built a civilization together with another human species? Otherwise, where the universe came from, and did it start with the Big Bang or was that just something that happened inside a larger universe? Story 55. Einstein said his last words on his deathbed in German to a nurse who only knew English. We will never know his last words. Story 56. How Steven Seagal was ever classed as a martial artist action movie star. Story 57. Did all languages come from a common ancestor or develop independently? Story 58. The Bronze Age collapse around the Mediterranean Sea is pretty far up there from a historical perspective. Story 59. How has Ticketmaster been able to get with their convenience fees for so long? Story 60. The mind. Anything else is ludicrous. Everyone uses it, no one actually knows what it is. Story 61. The murders of billionaires Barry and Honey Sherman found dead in their mansion in Toronto by their realtor. They were found with their necks tied, fully clothed on their pool deck with no signs of a break-in. Well-known philanthropists, Barry was in the pharmaceutical industry and they donated millions annually to multiple charities. The police originally believed it was a murder-suicide and didn't pursue other leads. The family launched a private investigation that found the evidence didn't support that theory and thus proved police incompetence. As the public became more interested, it was discovered there was a whole family dispute over inherited shares of the Apotex company. The Shermans' nieces and nephews had launched lawsuit over their right to inherit shares which they lost and most accepted. The Shermans' children hired private investigators BC of the inept Toronto police. It uncovered an unknown man leaving the property around the time of the murders. The case is fascinating and is the subject of multiple podcasts, a book, and movie. Story 62. I'm reading this with Wikipedia open in the other tab. Story 63. The greatest mystery is the simplest, why can't we all just get along? Story 64. What happened to Edgar Allan Poe in his last days? Story 65. What are the limits of our mind? Up until where or what can we comprehend? What was there before the Big Bang? Where did life come from? Were we chosen to unfold the secrets of the universe, and if so, why us? What happens to our consciousness when we die? Does it just vanish or is it transformed into something else? Why can't we find intelligent life in the universe? Are they hiding from us? Does it even exist? If it doesn't, why were we chosen to be the only intelligent life? Would that mean we have a purpose and mission in the universe? Why do we have a consciousness while everything else doesn't? What's even consciousness? How does it form? Will we ever reach singularity? Story 66. The Las Vegas mass shooting was in the news for like 3 days, and then nothing. Survivors and victims' families are still looking for answers. That's fucked up considering it's biggest mass shooting in US history. 60 dead and hundreds injured, and it's like it's forgotten. Story 67. Zodiac Killer. They only got away with it because it was so long ago. Killers usually don't go very long without getting caught in today's age. I think they have an idea, but it was so long ago that all the suspects are long dead by now, so we can't ever really know. Story 68. One of the most enduring mysteries in human history is the disappearance of the ancient Maya civilization. The Maya were a highly advanced civilization that flourished in Central America for hundreds of years before mysteriously disappearing in the 9th century. Despite extensive archaeological research, we still don't know exactly what caused the downfall of the Maya or why their civilization collapsed. Story 69. Imaginary goddamn numbers. They don't make sense, and yet electrical engineering is completely fucked without them. Story 70. If the universe contains everything and it's expanding, what's it expanding into? Story 71. The Sea People. They turned up out of nowhere, destroyed a few civilizations, then went back to wherever they came from. Though we don't know where that is. Story 72. Why does Ross, the largest friend, not simply eat the other 5? Story 73. If we're going for size here, we would have to say, the source of all existence. Some people say God while others say a Big Bang. More recent evidence found through observations of the JWST point to a universe much older than originally suspected, and this may even hint at the possibility of an infinite universe. Science informs a lot of the what and how questions, but the why question remains the biggest mystery of our existence. If the universe is indeed infinite, I fear we'll never be able to answer that question. Story 74. Where was Gondor when the Westfold fell? Story 75. How to use the 3 seashells. Story 76. What happens after death? Story 77. Did Luigi say fuck in Mario Golf? Story 78. Why yawns are contagious. Story 79. As much as I tried to think outside of the box and not include an unresolved crime, for me, it's the whereabouts of Xavier Dupont de Ligons, a French aristocrat who murdered his wife and 4 children, ages 13 to 20, in 2011. I've been baffled by it since the Unsolved Mysteries episode. He was tracked to the south coast of France and then just disappeared. Is he dead? Is he living under an alias and living his best life somewhere in South America? Is he still in France and his family is hiding him? Is he close to capture? I look forward to the day we will finally all know. If that ever happens. Story 80. Who reached the top of Everest first? Irvine and Mallory attempted the summit but never made it back. The one eyewitness said he saw them at the second step, and most believe that if they had made it that far, they wouldn't have stopped even if the summit would have resulted in death. Only one of their bodies were found, and the other one, with a camera that could show evidence if they did in fact reach the summit, is still missing. Don't think we'll ever get an answer, but it's so interesting to me. Story 81. How anesthesia works, we just know it knocks you out without any permanent effects. Story 82. The village of João Verde, Brazil 1923, 600 people disappeared, none were ever found. So weird edit, apparently the João Verde story was debunked. Good news then because, damn, it was disturbing. Thanks for tuning in to Peak Reddit. We hope you enjoyed hearing the latest and greatest stories from the most interesting corners of Reddit. If you loved what you saw and heard today, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the Peak Reddit community. You can check out more videos from us, you might like them. And if you have any amazing stories or experiences that you want to share with us, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a comment or shoot us a message and let us know what you think. We'll see you in the next video.